On time. So welcome everyone. This is although it's entitled The ABCs of Senior Housing, we've done 12 of these sessions over the past 2 years. We have a really exciting guest today. It doesn't mean that those on the call, Stu, are coming as a result of our ABCs of Senior Housing workshop series, because a lot of people have interest in property taxes. So I think you're going to have a very wide
Yes.
audience. If
Yeah.
anyone wants to practice telling us where you're calling from, welcome and tell us. Otherwise, we're going to jump on and get started as soon as we get the computer moving. Okay, a little bit about who I am. So hopefully you all can see the screen here. I am Brett Furman. I am your host today, and I'm a real estate broker. I've been a real estate broker for 37 years, involved in a little over 1,000 transactions, and do all kinds of speaking and writing, and I'm involved in lots of different things. I have a whole team behind me that is probably on the call as well, listening, that do a whole bunch of things for our real estate group. Um, the ABCs of Senior Housing was started about 2 years ago, and we don't really sell anything on this program. It's really an informational only program, and we're hoping you get a lot of value, especially today. Those on the call or those that are going to be listening to the recording, we had 53 people sign up, which is a great audience for us. I want to just give you a quick beginning announcement, and that is we have this concierge service. Those on the call, you have access to this. It's a free service, and what we try to do is give back and add value to people. And that way, if you ever need anything for your home, such as a tax appeal, well, we have Stewart Margolis on the call. But we have handymen and painters and plumbers, and whatever you need, you're welcome to call us anytime, and we'll match you with one of those people. And so this workshop today is about the most popular question we always get, which is, why am I paying so much in property taxes? And I guess a second part of this question would be, what do we do about that, right? That's really what this workshop today is going to be about. You're welcome to post questions. Again, we're going to have a very large audience. I see it building significantly right now. So we're going to get into I want to welcome my guest. I apologize. Stu Margolis has actually handled tax appeals for my family personally. I've sent him clients to help, and I want him to introduce himself. Tell us, I know you've been doing this, if I'm not mistaken, the same amount of time I've been in real estate, which is like 37 years doing this. Does that sound right, Stu?
Right. I've been doing this service since really 1990. I'm not sure. I guess that's what, 35 years.
35.
Yeah. So, and the way I help people is by letting them know that they might be paying too much in taxes, in school taxes and in property taxes. It's not like a given just because you got a tax bill that it's always right. Right? You need somebody to scrutinize the bill and to see if you're fairly paying what you should be paying. Right? It's not just, we can't assume that it's right all the time. It's right most of the time, but not all the time. That's why there's a board of assessments, and that we can appeal, our assessments for our property, which will lower our taxes automatically.
I think one caveat to the webinar today is
Yes.
both Stu and myself, we are not lawyers and don't pretend to be lawyers. So you can certainly,
Yes.
we recommend at any point talking to legal and getting some legal guidance if that's something you want to do. We also got a question from Jackie about she was having if her chat was disabled, but we are getting your Q and A's are coming in. So Jackie, you're
Yes,
working perfectly fine. Um, so let's jump in if we can, Stu. And
yes.
could you just explain the tax appeal and why is this important for homeowners?
Um, it's important because you want to check your property tax, right? Just what I was saying before, because it's not always right. You want somebody to be an advocate in your corner to say, look, my property's not worth 700,000, it's only worth 600,000. So why am I getting taxed on 700,000? Who makes up these rules? So in Pennsylvania, right, it's done by a formula, but everybody doesn't fit into the formula. It's supposed to include everybody, but it doesn't. So um, a tax appeal is something very, very useful. It can help lower your tax burden and save you money up to a couple $1,000. Sometimes it's 300 for a year. Sometimes it's 2,000. Sometimes it's 4,000. You know what I mean? It's all over the place. So there's no rhyme or reason. It's just you want to prove value. And
You know
that's what, yeah,
what I've found, Stu, is I've had
yes,
the, I guess you could say, the honor and privilege of going through this personally with probably about 8 or 10 of my properties. And
yes,
I've had income properties. I recently
yes,
went on one where we have a medical building, and
yes,
that hearing was, I think there were 19 people in the hearing, so that was a little
yes,
overwhelming. But
yes,
the residential, vanilla property, I found there's a lot of inequities, and it isn't really fair because I went in
yes,
once, I'll never forget this. I had both sides of a twin that I own personally, and
yes,
the left side was assessed at a certain value, and the right side was assessed significantly higher, yet they were
right,
a mirror image property, meaning they were exactly the same with bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage,
yes,
yet
yes,
the county evaluated them differently. So my point is,
right.
um, that's what you see out there, when
And
when
that
you're
and,
looking
and
at
that
this.
happens a lot. And it's like the county won't automatically do anything. It's like people wait for the county or the taxing authorities to do something that, oh, they're going to make a change. But they don't. They'll just leave it like that. It's up to you, the homeowner, to dispute it, to appeal it, to question it. Why is this happening? And there's a formal process that you have to go through, right, to appeal your tax or appeal your assessment, because the identical part of your twin is assessed at a different value, a lower value. Why is that? So you really have to, it's not you have to, that's why I exist, because I look for you, I do things for you, I do everything for you as much as I can, so you don't have to be bothered with all this looking and filling out a form and going to a hearing and that whole thing. Yeah,
The interesting thing about that one appeal, which I found most interesting, is I was happy um, with the lower number, right,
yes,
to begin with, yet, you know, we had one side that was higher and one side was lower. And at
yes,
the end result was they both came in lower. So my question to you, Stu,
yes,
in that case is it really the squeaky wheel that gets the oil? Meaning by, we talked before, I think we went live about, you were thinking
yes,
it's more like 1% of the population, maybe in Pennsylvania, is actually going through this process. But
yes,
nationally, when I did my research for today, I thought I saw somewhere about 5% if you look at like nationwide.
right.
Is it the squeaky wheel, like those that go through this process and, go to a hearing? Do they? Do you find they usually get something, some kind of a decrease in taxes?
Right? It's like we're not perfect. We're not always right.
Yeah.
What we appeal. And, sometimes you know, um, as an example, I think a house is only worth 600,000, going back to that example, and they're assessed for 700,000. Well, after, probing and doing research and whatever, the person wasn't telling me the complete truth. So maybe it really was worth 700,000. So I won't appeal it then, because I want to do what's winnable, what people can get a reduction for. Not, I'm not just throwing it against the wall and seeing what happens. I really want to be clear of what we're appealing is like, oh my God, this is totally not right. Yeah.
So the next question that we have is, you know, tell us, the benefit, meaning, is it just in the first year? Is this a lifetime savings thing? Do they get the benefit from when they win to when the next assessment changes? Explain, if you could, a little bit of how that all works.
Um, Basically, once your assessment on the property is reduced, it stays that way forever. Really, unless you're building an addition, which you're not doing with a condo, right? You're just
Right.
doing it with a single family home, basically, or a commercial property. So, but otherwise it'll last forever. It doesn't change. Your taxes may change. They may go up or down in every year. They usually go up, but the assessment doesn't change. What the assessment equals in value changes every year, right? And that's kind of where I come in. Yeah, you really want to check. You want to see what your value is. I mean, you don't have to neurotically check it every month, but it's good to check it once a year and see where you're at. And make sure everything's on the up and up and it's fair to you. Yeah.
So checking value, which is a
Yeah.
great segue. Um,
Yes.
is checking value, well, for the appeal, and I've downloaded the applications because those on the call, most of them are going to fall in Chester County, Montgomery
Yes.
County, Delaware County. We might have some
Yes.
Bucks or Philadelphia in there, but the
Yes.
majority of the people, and I looked at the forms, it seemed like they were saying two things. Either they wanted to have an appraisal done of
Yes.
the property within the last 6 months, right? So a
Yes.
6 months window, or
Yes.
they wanted to see 3 to 5 sales comps if you're not using an appraisal. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
And then
It
they
does.
also
Yeah.
talked about some pictures of the house. Could you show pictures, talk about your bedrooms and baths? Because they're looking for
Yes.
comparable type homes, meaning if you're a 3 bedroom, you really can't compare it to a 5 bedroom, right?
Correct.
It's got to be close in
Well,
height.
right. The square footage has to be close. It doesn't matter if you have 10 bedrooms or 1 bedroom. If the square footage is the same, that's what they're looking at, right? They're not looking at like the individual bedrooms. Although that helps, it's not really a major criteria for determining value in my experience. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, Brett, ask your question again. I'm sorry.
The question really was about, determining for those on the call, like determining value. And most of those forms
Yes,
look for an appraisal. They want
yes,
a real appraisal of the property in the last 6 months, or produce
right.
comparables.
Okay, all right, so let me stop. So an appraisal, I like to have an appraisal. Of course, that's the best evidence of value.
Yeah.
Um, and if you purchased your property within the last year or so, or 18 months, you don't necessarily need an appraisal. You can kind of use comparable sales, which, are square footage and land size and age of property and so forth and so on. But if a property's 10 years old, I didn't used to do this in the beginning, but I'll recommend to them, look, I'm not doing anything unless you have an appraisal, unless you get an appraisal done. Because that's what they look at as the gold standard to prove value. That's what the counties look at. They also look at if you recently purchased your property. And so they don't need an appraisal. It's just kind of redundant for them. But you just want to make sure, like I want to make sure when somebody recently, as an example, when somebody recently purchases their property, that it wasn't a foreclosure or it wasn't a short sale or it wasn't, some an estate sale, some weirdness that happens. And if it is, then I want an appraisal, right? We just can't throw out frivolously, an appeal because we think, you think your taxes are high. You can't do that. You can't argue taxes. You can only argue value. And they'll happily listen when it's value, right? But they won't listen at all if you complain about taxes and your neighbor's taxes are lower. They don't care. Yeah.
And you talk about the appraisal. I have one
Yes.
from a while ago. I'll never forget this. I was there, and the appraisal that was utilized was in
Yes.
that period of time, but the appraisal said it was for the purpose of a refinance, right? It didn't use the word tax appeal. And I
Right.
remember them using that against us, saying, well, we really, look at this language. I really can't use it for such. Is that what you find? You need to get something recent and it should say for tax appeal purposes, or is that not
Not
true?
necessarily
Okay.
though. They look at because what the counties think the appraisal is a neutral value, right? It's not based on like if you're trying to sell it or you're trying to do this, they look at it as a neutral thing. So I don't necessarily have an appraisal that says specifically this is what the appraisal's for. It's just an indication of value, right? That's all it is. I mean, yeah. So,
It
yeah,
looks like all these forms with the various counties we talked about mentioned
yes,
they wanted to see three copies when you go, and that's I'm assuming that's the board. There's three people usually, or there could be one. I saw instances with doing
right. There could
Corona.
be one, there could be three. There's no rhyme or reason. Sometimes it doesn't matter so much. It just matters that um that you're appealing and that you kind of show up for the appeal process and presenting to them why you think your assessment should be reduced and so forth and so on. And if you have a legitimate case, then they'll lower it. I see it all the time, they'll lower it. Sometimes they don't lower it. Sometimes it's your word against their word, right? They don't always do that. So you have to make your case. I sound like an attorney now, but you have to make your case as compelling as possible, right? So I do all the nuts and bolts. I really want to make sure that what I'm arguing or what I'm presenting is very compelling. It'd be really hard pressed for them to not lower the assessment. You know, what's fair is fair, so that's where I'm coming from. Yeah.
So I think the next kind of in sequence is um, when you should do it, how you do it, and the kind of the mechanics, if you could walk through maybe start the deadline for
Yeah.
the process first. What's the
Right.
deadline for
Well,
filing?
right. The ultimate deadline for most counties in Pennsylvania is August 1st.
Okay.
Some are August 15th, some are September 1st. I think in Philadelphia, it may even be October 1st, but in the counties, it's always August 1st.
Okay.
In Berks County, it might be August 15th. I have it written down and check with them every year because they do change that too sometimes. You know, so you want to make sure by hook or crook that if you want to appeal, that you get it in by the deadline, right? So the deadline is August 1st, not for 2025, but for 2026, right? They're always a year ahead. So you really, really want to make sure that it's by then. And so now I'm gonna get into the weeds. I don't want to start getting into the
Okay. I
weeds
know this is
with,
the confusing part,
yeah, yeah.
but go ahead.
Um, but there's something called a common level ratio, which is again boring and in the weeds. It's a divisor. It's a method of them figuring out what your property's worth, and that changes every July. So I try and make sure that I get in the appeals before they change the ratio, because I never know which way it's going to affect the property. But once
Huh.
the appeal's in, it's in. They can't say, well, the ratio is this now. But well, that's why I appealed in before July, because I can use the other ratio, the previous ratio. So again, it's in the weeds, and I don't want anyone to get off track here, but it's just, it's something that I personally like to do. Yeah.
When I looked at these ratios in preparation of today,
Yes.
what I found was that ratio changes, and it appears based on I did a look back, and I just wanted to see like appreciation numbers and things. And
Correct.
I think
Right.
you raised a really, really good point that I never thought about, and that is if
Yes.
you're going to appeal, to do it early. It appears based on the way the market is moving, right, with
Right.
price appreciation, with inflation, that number is going to change, and it won't be to your benefit, right? It's likely to, like, when I looked at these numbers, I saw the step ratio actually like change in the favor of the county and against the taxpayer, so that it does make sense, it seems like, to file before July. I would.
Right. When you really get down to the nitty gritty of it, it doesn't, in my experience, it makes sense, but for me to file an appeal, but when you get right down to it, it doesn't really matter so much, because usually the ratios get, and I was talking to Brett before this, when the ratios go down,
Yeah.
values go up. And I'll
Oh,
give you an
yeah.
example. So let's say your home, right? I'm just going to give an example. Your home is worth $1 million, right? If you're going to sell it, it's worth $1 million. That's what I'm getting. That's what it's worth. There's no denying it. And so you get an assessment in the mail, or however you get it, and the assessment's $400,000. And you think, wow, it's really lower than what it should be, right? But in actuality, the 400,000, or I'm going to say, so the 400,000 equals 1,215,000, right? By using the ratio that they use, right, to figure out value. It's nothing that I'm doing that's different or weird. It's just I'm using what they're providing and then what they use. So if you have $1 million property and it's assessed at 400,000, well, you have a good case, right? Because the value is really 1.215. And so that's where the confusion lies with a lot of people. They think assessments are true, are actual value when they're not. They're just not. They have nothing to do with value other than to deceive you, not intentionally, but like as you were saying before, it's confusing, right? It's somewhat confusing the way they do it, and I'm here to tell you that it's not. That's why you want someone in your corner, unless you know the ins and outs of tax assessments and appeals, right?
It also
Yeah,
seemed what I said earlier was that the way the system was designed, right, where only let's call it
yeah,
1% of the population is filing an appeal, right? Um, it-
yeah,
and it's because people get this assessment letter in the mail and think, geez, my house is worth, I'm really in a good position, but in reality,
correct,
it could be the reverse. And they've
correct.
made it almost so difficult to evaluate your what your house is worth that it seems like it's
Yes,
tilted in the favor of the municipalities and not in the favor of the taxpayers.
right. And I don't think that's intentional, Brett, as
Yeah.
we discussed before, but that happens. It's very confusing. It shouldn't be this confusing. There shouldn't be a need for myself. Really, I mean, they should automatically change it if a value over a year, if the values are in that neighborhood or street or 700,000, that's what they are. There shouldn't be one at 600,000. There shouldn't be one at 800. It's like everybody should pay the same percentage of taxes, and they don't. And if you're getting a letter from me, it means I've done a little pre-research on your property. And that means you probably have a good case. I'm not right all the time, but you probably have a good case. It's worth exploring. You don't have to do anything. The worst that can happen is they'll reject your appeal. They'll just say no. And some people, right, have the fear, this is like a fear that goes around sometimes. It's like, if I appeal, can't they raise my assessment and raise my taxes because I appealed? And it's like, they don't do, in all the years that I've been doing this, I've never seen an assessment raised, right? I've never seen that at all. And one of the reasons is because when I appeal, it's either very close or it's clear cut. It's not like I'm saying, they're saying that the property's worth $10 million and I'm saying it's worth, 500,000. I'm not egregious with it. It's got to be really clear cut or very close to clear cut. So I don't want to give them any ammunition or any cause to think about, raising somebody because they're appealing some nonsense. So yeah. So but I've never seen an assessment raised because you appealed it.
Could you talk a little bit to uh, those on the call about like what the costs of actually doing a tax appeal?
And Brett, I think it depends. The cost depends, right? It can range from anywhere from 32% of what you're saving over 1 year to to 37% over 2 years. It really depends how much work's involved and how much, right? It's all over the place, the fee structure, because of you don't know how much research, or you think you know what is going to be the research involved in it or the work involved with it, but you don't know for sure going in, right? So, yeah,
We got a good
it's,
question. I think it's appropriate time. And those on the call, please, you have the Q&A section of Zoom. Feel free to use it.
yes.
Jackie raised a really good question, and she said, does having my home assessed for a lower value impact my property value for pricing to market if I go to sell my home? And maybe that should more be directed to me, but I'm gonna have you start on that one, Stu.
Well, and
Um,
right, and you can answer it, but what I'm gonna say, it's incredible. It's really valuable for a new homeowner that's
yeah.
gonna purchase your property to know that their taxes are where they should be. The worst thing is when someone buys a property and they realize, uh-oh, my taxes are so high. How come they're so high? And right, and so it doesn't really affect the resale value at all. It just helps it. It helps in a way. The assessments and what I do and the taxes don't have really anything to do with what you're going to sell your property for. It just helps a new buyer to feel at ease because your taxes are where they should be, and they realize that and they see that and they know that, and it's really helpful.
It's also a
And what,
benefit. I've seen
yeah,
it recently on one I'm working on where
yes,
the seller of the property has the property on the market. It's a fairly expensive property, and
yes,
it was just constructed, right, within the last uh,
yes,
2 years, and the taxes are obscene. I mean, it's just a big number to begin with. Um,
yes,
so this homeowner said, I'm going to, appeal, and was able to
yes,
lower the taxes. And it opens
yes,
up the audience to more affordability, meaning certain people will object when taxes hit a certain level. And
yes,
you'll find that you might have a greater audience. I would argue to Jackie that um, I think it's a positive because it brings down the so-called operating cost of the house.
yes,
It's the equivalency, I think you could say, having a solar on a roof versus not, because solar reduces your electric bills, right? And
right,
a property tax appeal lowers your taxes. The
yes,
flip side to that argument, I mean, there always are two sides, is that someone could look at it and say, well, shoot, the assessed value was 1 million. Now you just lowered it down to 800. Does that mean the house value is less? Because,
no,
but
no, it
that's not,
doesn't. No, it has nothing to do with
it
it, Brett.
doesn't,
That's right. And
but,
Jackie, it has nothing to do with it, right? It's it doesn't reselling your house is totally a different animal than appealing your property taxes. It is. It just is. It's a different animal. It has nothing, one has nothing to do with the other, in my experience.
and
Right. I encourage, even if people, I'll solicit by mail to like as an example to a person, and they'll say, well, I would love to do this, right? But I'm going to be selling my property in 6 months, right? And I'm saying, like, well, that's a complete reason why you'd want to do it. It's
yes.
for the new homeowner is going to have reduced taxes. They're going to love that, right? They're going to really love that. So yeah, you would definitely do that. Yes.
So my 37 years as a real estate broker found that one of the
Yes.
things that the buyer looks at besides, bedrooms and bathrooms and schools and all that is taxes, right? That's one of the things they look at. And I've
Yes.
seen buyers eliminate because they said, I don't want to have my taxes above X, whatever that number is. So by
Correct.
doing the appeal, you might expose your house to a wider, bigger audience.
Talking about, like, what do you mean? I'm sorry. What do
So
you mean? Like, clarify yourself.
So by getting if you do get the appeal and your assessed
Yes.
value comes down, your
Yeah.
taxes also come down, right? So you're
Correct.
paying less, which means
Yes,
there's a greater pool of buyers that would be interested because it's
you
an
would think,
affordability
yeah,
issue,
you
right?
would
So,
think, you would know more than I would,
yeah.
but yeah, you would think so, right? But I don't even know if buyers kind of look at taxes, you know, it's an afterthought kind of, like some townships are like ridiculous with taxes, no matter where you are and what county you are. And some townships are ridiculous, and some counties are really low. I mean, some townships are really low in counties. So, and there's, I don't know. Yeah, there's no rhyme or reason sometimes. It's just doing the right thing and what's fair. That's what matters.
So I have a whole bunch more questions coming in, and while we're
Yes.
on the question and answer, I think it's a good time to try to answer some of them. I hope we get to all of them. We may or may not because we only allocated an hour for today. But so
Okay.
the question from Kathleen was, if
Let
you
me just
go
take
through,
one
sorry,
little.
taking a break, maybe. So for those on the call, while I wait for Stu, I actually get called lots of times if you need help with providing the comparables for your home. That's something I do. That I do it gratuitously, and basically for these filings, they usually want um, 3 to 5 comparable sales to show, to make your case. Remember, you have the burden. The burden is on the taxpayer the burden of proof is on you to show why your value is wrong and should be reduced. So we talked about an appraisal was one thing, right? Getting an appraisal. That's like what Stu said. That was like the gold standard, right? Because it's an independent person looking at it. And the other option was to present the comparables. So you're welcome at any point to call me. You good,
Yes.
Stu? You okay?
Back. Yeah, I just had to get some water.
Okay.
A glass of water.
Um,
I can. Yeah.
that's why I always come. I
Yeah.
always hydrated. So the question was from Kathleen
Yes.
was, if you go through the process
Yes.
and don't get a reduction,
Yes.
is there a cost for that if you don't get any reduction?
Right. Right. Well, but as you know, I work on a contingency, right? So the only way that I would get a paid, right, if there is a reduction, if there's no this is another incentive of why people use me. It's because if I don't get anything for you, if we try and nothing happens, then there's no fee. I mean, how great is that? You're only paying me, as I mean, as an attorney would, like for a slip and fall case. It's like, if they can't get you results, then you don't pay them, right? So I just want to make sure that there's a reduction, because that's the only fair way, right? I can't charge anybody anything unless there's a reduction for what did I do? What happened? Nothing. So there's got to be a result for me to, have a fee or charge somebody. Yeah.
So it's
Otherwise,
performance
there's no
based.
fee. Right. And that's the incentive. That's what's so great about this, right? There's no fee unless there's an actual concrete reduction.
So Curtis raised a really good question, and
Yes.
that was, we're talking about the appeal process and changing your assessed value. Does it apply to your school tax, your county tax, and your township tax?
Yes. The answer is yes, yes, and yes.
And of
Right.
course, the school tax is the greatest in the various savings. That's the majority
Correct.
usually of your.
Correct, right.
taxes.
That's the biggest one. The school taxes, probably, I'm gonna say 70%. The county and township make up the other 30% of what you pay. But yes, and that's right. And that's the reason that you want to try and have this done. You don't want to frivolously do this. You just want to make sure that you're doing it because you have a case. And sometimes you don't know if you have a case unless you getting something from me, or you're just checking and I'm doing some research for you and I'm checking to see if your assessment is in line with what it should be, not anything more than it should be. It's not fair. Yeah, so that's, yeah.
So, let's see, there's another question. So somebody who was a buyer in 2015 of a real estate property was
Yes.
uneducated on the topic, didn't know didn't know to ask when the most recent assessment appeal had been done. So talk to us a little bit about, you know, if the prior person did the assessment appeal, does it still continue to benefit subsequent buyers down the road?
It does. And okay, so backing up a little bit, like I'll just take Montgomery County as an example. Well, the last time they did an actual reassessment of the entire county, it took them 4 years.
Yes.
And you know, that's when the assessments change then, but it lasts forever, right? Unless they do a countywide reassessment. And even if they do a countywide reassessment, it doesn't matter. It's what the value is now. It's not what the perceived value was back in 2015 or what's going to be in 2030. It doesn't mean anything. It's just what it is now. And that's why you can appeal every year if you want to. And that's why it's good to check. It doesn't hurt to check. There's no cost to checking to make sure that you're in line. And some people don't want to be bothered. That's fine if you don't want to be bothered. That's where I come in, and I'll check for you, and if there's something there, then we'll appeal it. I'll appeal it, and there's an attorney that goes to the hearings to represent you, right? So you don't have to come to the hearing, and that's another great thing. You don't have to go to anybody to see anybody to go to a hearing. People hate that. I hate that. I have to go to court. I don't want to be bothered with that. I don't want to take a day off from work. I don't, so that's where I have everything streamlined. So it's really easy for somebody to make an appeal when it's warranted. And that's what's the beauty of this is.
I did one still
Yes.
a couple times in a row, and this is a New Jersey vacation home. And that was a very interesting process because it seemed
Yes.
like they were getting more than 1% of the population requesting appeals.
Yes.
And some of the times it didn't even go to hearing. I found that, the solicitor for the municipality wasn't
Yes.
interested in having all these people come in because it
Yes.
was a capacity issue, right? They didn't have the capacity to have that many hearings. So it's almost seemed like they were incentivized to just work out, start giving reductions and
Right.
make these people go away so they don't overburden our infrastructure. Does that sound right? Or
Well, it's kind of right. It's not totally right, but at the hearings, as an example, right, they don't want people coming into the hearings if possible. They just want the attorneys coming in or the people that represent them coming in to, right, like you said, to not overburden the whole system. So yeah, that's another really good thing is a lot of times it depends what county you're in. the rules are a little different and nuanced in every county I don't work in every county in Pennsylvania, but in the 4 or 5 counties that I work, the rules are basically the same, but they're not. They're a little nuanced you have to understand all the different little things that go on. But yes, most of the counties don't want anyone there other than the attorney,
Yeah.
right? If possible, yeah,
Right. And
yeah,
I also saw in preparation for today, I
yes,
downloaded all the various applications for Chester, Montgomery, Delaware County. It's interesting, wasn't available yet. They said it would be available in March, so you couldn't even make your application yet, I guess, until their application was available. What I saw very
yeah,
interesting in Chester County, which I hadn't seen before, and maybe it's new, was they
yes.
gave you 2 hearing options when you fill out the paperwork. One was you want to just submit 3 comparable sales, um, and there's no hearing.
Yes.
And the second option was, no, I want a hearing, but if you take that option, they want you to have an appraisal, it sounds like. Does that sound right?
Necessarily, no, it's not really right.
Okay.
I mean, they'll see. Here we go again. Like the rules for the public when you're appealing one time
Okay.
are kind of different than when an attorney does it or I do it, because I've been doing it for so long and kind of know a lot of the people in the county offices here and there. It's like, they'll, as an example, they'll require 3 copies of something where I'm just giving them 1 copy and they're okay with that. But maybe with a taxpayer or a property owner that comes in, they'll want 3 copies,
Okay.
right? So, yeah, I mean, what was the other part of the question?
So it sounds like there's a benefit then for, like, I mean, obviously the options are the homeowner could elect to do the appeal on
Yes,
their own, take a day off of work, go to a hearing, fill out all the
yes,
paperwork, or hire someone like yourself that would take the burden and figure out. And then,
right,
so that's kind of like the first choice the taxpayer has to consider it. And I
right.
think first they have to figure, is there even a case? Is there a inequity of the value?
Right. And then okay. So getting back to you, like within Chester County, they also offer this method of, well, you can appeal, right? And we'll review it, right? Just what you said, you can sign a form that they'll review instead of having a formal hearing and blah, 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 and they'll take into consideration. But that really is for new homes, right?
Yeah.
It's for homes that were just built and you're a new homeowner buying new construction, right? They know what the house is worth. They don't need a whole story. So it's good to use that method for new construction. Right. And that's what it's there for. And I think every county should adopt that. They should have a review of new construction. But Chester County is the only one that I found that has that option. So yeah, it's a good option.
Do you also find, Stu, because I did in preparation for today, I was running all kinds of sample calculations to see some various
Yes.
properties. Is it accurate or safe to say that if your property is older, built
Yeah.
25, 50, 100 years in age versus
Yes.
constructed recently, is that a fair thing to say that it seems like it could be underassessed, like if it's a lot older, because they didn't have all the data at the time when they were figuring out. The county really doesn't know what the heck's in your house because it's an old 100-year-old
Correct.
house. Is that
Right.
accurate or?
It is accurate. And there's a lot of people that are kind of underassessed as well. And I don't really want to, that's why I'm saying I don't want to call it, like if somebody tells me to appeal and I see their property, I don't think we should appeal this because, what you just said. So it's like, yeah, sometimes appeals aren't worth doing because there's nothing there. And, you really need to, make sure that there's something there that you're going to appeal.
We had another question from the Q&A, and those on the call, you're still welcome. We've had a lot of questions today, which is great, which
Yeah.
means people are listening and people are
Yes.
very interested in this topic. So I know because by the number of signups we had, I think we were at 53. That's a lot of people.
Yes.
The question was, when you get the reduction,
Yes.
your fee could go anywhere from 32 to 37. Is the fee
Yes.
based on the first year savings, or does it count like every year thereafter? There's still like payment and
Again, Brett, it depends. It's either the first year or the first 2 years
okay,
savings, right? Because once you've gotten it reduced, it stays that way a lot of times forever. But I say up to 3-4 years because it's kind of guaranteed unless you're doing something really drastic to the property that you couldn't do with a condominium, but you could do with a single family home. You're building an addition. That's what I'm saying. It's kind of guaranteed. There's nothing they can do. So that's why sometimes my fee is a couple of years, because if there's a reduction, it's only fair that, a person like myself partakes in, helping that person. So I helped you for, let's say, 5 years. Let's just say it's 5 years.
okay.
Well, it's fair to entitle me for a portion of the savings, right? But sometimes it's only one, and sometimes it's two, but it's right. You're only paying me, or a person like me, if there's a reduction, right? There's nothing other. And great, I'm happy to pay somebody. If you're saving me $1,000, I'm happy to give you 300 of it. I'm happy to do that. I don't do it every year. I maybe do it for 1 year, maybe for 2, depending on the property. But that's it, right? That's it.
So we did have a whole bunch of more questions. The audience, I think, is coming alive.
Yes.
We had some about how do they contact you and reach you, which I did share your information. So we're kind of coming. I'm going to jump ahead a couple. So I
Yes.
can share your contact. You already covered cost. I'm going to jump ahead for those that want. Is this accurate, Stu? Your contact information?
It is, and that's really the best way. And I love to get emails inquiring. But and of course, I love the self, or it's not my cell, it's actually my office line.
Okay.
My cell, I don't really give out unless, it's really needed by somebody. But yes, that's the best way to get a hold of me, either way.
And because there was a question from Jackie, she wanted to know, to begin the process, do they have to? So Jackie, I guess, lives in Delaware County. Does
Yes.
she start by contacting Delaware County, or does she start by contacting you and then you
By
contact Delaware
contacting
County?
me, right. Right. All the counties are different. And like, even getting back to your question of when you can appeal, like, all the counties are different. Like
Okay.
in Chester County, they really won't even accept your appeal until May. But in Montgomery County, they're already accepting appeals, right? They're already starting their scheduling. In let me just see, what did I say? So in Delaware County, they wait, you can't, they won't even accept your appeal until like June, July, right? every county's nuanced differently
differently.
in what they will accept. And when they'll, and the same thing with Bucks County, they wait till the very end. You can't really appeal until, but Montgomery County, you can appeal night and day, anytime they'll accept it. It's just the way they are. Yeah.
And I think those on the call should also understand that if you get the if Stu does the hearing and you get
Yes.
a good result and you get a reduction in your assessed value, it actually doesn't go into effect, right, until the next calendar year. Is that correct?
Well, correct. Right. Unless it's brand new construction, then there's an option, what's called the interim appeal, where you can appeal it for the same year, the interim taxes that you might get. Not for the annual taxes, but for the interim taxes, they'll even give you a refund. So, and that's strictly for just new construction. It's not for anybody else. So yes, everybody's a little different. Every county's a little different.
So,
Another thing, Brett,
go
and
ahead.
what's really incredible too, is you'll get an official notice from the county. It's not like I'm telling you, well, you got a reduction, you have to trust me. It's like, it's public record. You got a reduction. It's on their letterhead. It's an official statement. It's an official document. It's, you know what I mean? It's not like somebody's like making it up. Oh, you got a reduction. I'm telling you, you got one. That's what I was told. But no, it's written down. It's in the books. It's in the county records, right? It may not be immediately, but eventually it gets there. Just like your mortgage company, they may not,
Yeah,
right,
that's a good
reduce
point.
your mortgage immediately because you got an assessment reduction, but they'll catch up to it and they'll give you a reduction. Your whole mortgage thing will go down. Your whole mortgage payment will go down. And if you don't have a mortgage, your taxes will go down. So yeah, it's great in that way.
So the bottom line is, for those on the call, is you really have very little to lose. It seems like,
Oh
you
my
know,
God, there's nothing to
and
lose. That
the
that's what I
gain could continue on for many, many years.
correct.
And there is a
Right. That's not
probability that your taxes, you're not being, you're not, it's not fair the way it was done when they did the original assessments. Because what I know is when they do these countywide reassessments, they engage a firm. And
yes.
I remember looking at the contract that gets awarded, and I
Yes.
figured out that they're only giving each property a minuscule amount of money to figure out the value, right? When an appraiser might be $400, they were like, $5. So you kind of get what you pay
Yeah.
for. It's more of an algorithmic value where they look at neighborhoods and try to figure, I
Right.
think they look at one property in the neighborhood to figure out 100
Yes.
other ones, which is, that's
Right.
where the problem really starts, right? Stu, would you
Right.
say that
And
that's
right. And also the thing is they may do a countywide reassessment and like let's say they do a portion of, we'll say, Delaware County, right? They do like a neighborhood or two or three first in the first year. But then by the third year, right, they're doing something else. They're doing another area in Delaware County. But the first people you did are no longer correct. It's like the prices have gone down. So you can't say that's fair or that's what the value should be because they've already gone down now. But you're leaving the assessment as it was 2 years ago and the value. So, it doesn't make any sense. So, that's what I'm saying. It's like you really have to question. You have to ask questions. You can't just assume everything's right. It is most of the time. It is a lot of the time. but there's times where it's not. And that's where I come in, and that's what I try and alert people to, right? And that's kind of, Brett, what I did with you. Like,
Yeah.
you called me. I really helped lower the assessment on the property that you owned in Montgomery County, and and that's it. And that's how you got to me. And it was like, oh my God, I
And
helped Brett, and that was really rewarding for me. Like, oh my God, I helped you. That's the best thing that someone could do, is helping them save money on something. Yeah.
so I think we're coming up on our hour.
Okay.
And I wanted to see if you had any final, I know you covered a lot of tips and tricks already. The one that I rings true was it sounded like early was better than later because of the step ratio change period time.
Yes.
So I heard
Yes.
that. But is there any final like comments that you want to leave for anyone that you think would be helpful?
Um, gosh. Again, I'm just gonna like be redundant and repeat myself. You just want to check. You don't want to assume that everything's okay. You want to check. You want to check that your value's okay, that your assessment is okay, everything's in line with what you're, like, we go to an accountant, right? When we do our taxes at the end of the year in April, whatever. And so, because we want to make sure we're not overpaying, and oh my God, and it's like tax season. It's like the kind of the same thing. We just don't want to assume, that our taxes, our school taxes, county taxes, and township taxes are, what they're supposed to be. Don't assume that. We should check it. We want to make sure, you know. So that's my final message of just, it doesn't hurt to check.
And
The
I've
worst
seen,
that can happen, the worst that can happen is nothing.
well,
Nothing will happen, and you move on with your life and everything's fine. But yeah,
what I've seen in my 37 years as a real estate broker is that
yes,
I see a lot of inequities, especially with taxes, right? Because I look at it almost every single day and I'm like, oh my God, like your taxes are just too high, like
right,
your assessed value is not right, but no one really took the time to
right,
appeal, and it adds up. Like we're talking about, dollars and cents, right? Like, if it's a couple $1,000 or even if it's $2,000 savings a year,
yes,
5 years, that's $10,000. Like that's nothing to,
right. It's nothing. Even if it's four
yeah,
hundred dollars a year, so what? It's like over 5 years. Well, that's $2,000. So what?
yeah,
It's like that's 2,000 that you're not paying. It's 400 a year that you're not paying. You didn't do anything. You know what I mean? It's not like you had to walk a tightrope for 100 miles to get, you didn't do anything. So, that's why I'm saying I try and scream from the rooftops that, like, it's good to check that you're paying the correct amount of taxes. I say it in 100 different ways. It's like, if it's the same, it's like saying, if somebody offered you $1 million, you would say, well, no, I don't want to do this. I can't, it's got to be some kind of scam or something like that. But I'm saying to you, look, there's a way to save money. There's a way to not pay as much in taxes if you want to. It's not for everybody. It's not, out of like 100,000 properties, let's say in Pennsylvania, maybe there's 10,000, right? Or 5,000 that need this service. It's like, oh my God, let's do it then. Okay.
well, my only parting remarks is for everyone is
Yes.
for those on the call, we'll send out a survey. This series is a monthly series where we have a lot of other guests lined up for for the next several months. We'll be
Yes,
sending a survey, would be helpful. You'll get one at the conclusion of this, just so we know what we can do in the future or any improvements or changes you want to make. I'd be grateful if you took the time. And I'm very appreciative of having Stu spend his Saturday um, spending his time with us on a nice, actually sunny day. So thank you,
yes.
Stu.
Well, it was
And
just an hour though, and it's,
and those that couldn't attend, or those on the call, we'll be sending out in about another week or so. You should be able to get a copy of the recording for those that have other people that you want to have listen to it. You'll be able to forward it to them as well. So I want to
right.
thank everybody. This was really informative. I learned stuff, and to me, that's like the best. That's my reward, is I can learn more about the topic that I'm really passionately interested in. So thank you, Stu.
Okay, good. I'm glad I, could help a little. Yeah,
Thank
I'm
everyone.
I
And
love
again,
talking.
keep an eye out on the website. You can follow us in social. We
Yes,
have all kinds of programs that we run with very interesting guests. And you can also, if you go to the website, you can access some of the prior recordings. The most watched and listened to other recording is about saving $500,000, how to do that on the sale of a primary residence. So we did a deep dive. That was with a lawyer. That's on that's one of our recordings. You're welcome. If you go to our website, you're welcome to download any of those other webinars. So thank you.
okay.
Have a great day, everyone.